Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about the teaser trailer that came out for Let the Right One In, a new TV show on Showtime. I don't know if this necessarily won't be a trailer discussion, but more so just a general conversation about this. If you haven't seen the teaser already, I'll include a link to it in the description down below. But this is an interesting thing because first and foremost, I had no idea this was getting adapted into the TV show because my experience with this series, I've never read the book. I have watched the original movie adaptation years ago. I think my cousin showed it to me when I was like in maybe middle school or high school, you know, around that time. Maybe, I don't remember. Probably high school. And I've never seen the American adaptation, Let Me In, which I always like flip those around. I thought Let Me In was the original movie and Let the Right One In was the American adaptation, but that's flipped. Because I believe it was like Chloe Grace Moretz was in that. And also, I was just looking it up recently. Did not know that Matt Reeves directed it. Not unless I was wrong about that, but I think I read that he directed it. I thought that was interesting. But yeah, just based on the fact is we're getting this adapted into a TV show, which I had no idea. Interesting enough, I was reading too that apparently TNT ordered a pilot for this back in what, I think 2017 is what I saw, but they passed on the series and it took a couple years later and now Showtime's doing it, which I think is probably a better fit because TNT would have probably had to rein that in quite a bit. They could get bloody on TNT, but probably definitely not to the extent Showtime can. I've been loving the teaser. It's like, oh, from the network that brought you Yellow Jackets and Dexter, and that's kind of them trying to lay in the groundwork of what kind of show you're getting. Because it's been over a decade since I've probably seen the original movie Let the Right One In. Because I think the book's originally Swedish, and I think the original movie adaptation was Swedish too, I think. But it's been years since I've seen it, so I don't remember a lot of stuff from the movie. Once again, I didn't read the book. But looking at the trailer, it was interesting from what I remember because the big focus of the movie is basically a little boy like who basically has to deal with a lot of crap in his life. He is beat up a lot and he's bullied. He ends up meeting a girl who he ends up finding out is actually a vampire, and they become friends and he kind of keeps her secret and stuff like that. That's kind of like the gist of it to my recollection. What I think is interesting is like in this story it's like more of a father-daughter relationship, which I thought was kind of interesting that they're setting up. But that's also the thing of, because if I remember correctly, the vampire character has a adult guardian, and I can't remember how because I remember how the movie ends. Spoilers for the movie, and I'm assuming how the book ends, but I know the little boy, I looked it up recently, I think his name was Oscar, basically he took over, like he leaves where he was growing up. He left like his home behind, and he basically takes care of, because like her thing is like she hides away in a suitcase, if I remember correctly. And so he, like, the movie ends with him leaving with her, and he's like, he's going to take over a responsibility of taking care of her and making sure she's okay. Now, the guardian character in that movie, if I remember correctly, was basically Oscar decades before. He's like, right, he was someone that was in love with her that took up, you know, it's just almost like someone, it's always that torch getting passed on to someone else decides to take up the mantle of looking after her. I can't remember. I think the guardian dies in the movie because I think the girl kills him, either because he did something wrong where he was just old and she was trying to save. I don't remember the circumstances, but I feel like I remember her killing him. So the reason why I'm bringing that all up is because to my recollection, I mean, based on that, what we saw in the teaser trailer, I'm like, okay, so are they changing are they taking the principle but adapting it? Because I could have sworn, because they're making the main focus of like, oh, the person being bullied and messed with is the girl, but I think it was the little boy character that kind of went through a lot of that. Once again, I'm not remembering the movie that well. Obviously, once again, it's been so long, but the fact is they also introduced like an older character, but there is a little boy she's talking to in the teaser. So I'm curious, are we just kind of getting a different perspective from him? Maybe this was the perspective in the movie and I just don't remember. But I thought it was always mainly coming from like the little boy's point of view. And maybe like this older guardian, obviously probably going to die by the end of like the first season or something like that. And that little boy ends up taking over. I don't think this is supposed to be like some like pseudo sequel, like, oh, that's supposed to be like the character Oscar from like the book or the original movie. Like, I think this is just kind of a fresh start, and I think they are kind of like reimagining it to some degree. if that's what the case is, or maybe it's just like, right, we're starting with a different perspective before we get to the story that typically, maybe it's a little more insight because it is a show. You're able to kind of like dive into like that guardian character a little bit more, what he's struggling with protecting this little girl that's like a pseudo daughter, or like I said, either they're just straight up changing the entire dynamic rather than it being like a little boy and a little girl. It's just always going to be a father-daughter relationship. There's actually an interesting video game. It's a JRPG called Nier, if you've never heard of it. You don't really need to know the ins and outs of it. But an interesting thing about this video game is that there are two different versions of it. There's Replicant and there's Gestalt. Overall, the only difference is character-wise. The main character, Nier, in the Gestalt version, he is an older person and he has a daughter. Whereas in Replicant, that dynamic is a younger character and it's a brother-sister relationship. So it kind of reminds me of that kind of exchange. I think Gestalt was kind of like the Western release of that game. Originally, Replicant was only in Japan, but subsequently, obviously, they remastered that, and you know, it's gotten a more worldwide release. Kind of using that as kind of an example of like, oh, changing that dynamic. You know, probably doesn't change too much overall, but it adds certain elements to the dynamic. You can layer it in certain ways that maybe, I mean, because those are very different relationships, from like a little boy being in love with and falling for a little girl and wanting to look after her, to like a father and a daughter relationship. Those are two very different dynamics, and you can kind of approach them in very different ways. So that's just kind of what I was pulling from, because I thought that was interesting. But, you know, and once again, it's just like, this is me talking off the top of my head from what I remember from the movie. And once again, this is just a teaser. It's not even a full-blown trailer. So a full-blown trailer probably give more context and more understanding of everything that goes on it. But to my recollection, from what I remember of the movie, I was like, the movie was pretty fucked up, if I remember. And that's why I think they're leaning into like the whole like, oh, it's from the network that brought you Dexter and Yellow Jackets, kind of letting you know what time it is. Because I know this series, that at least the movie adaptation, was like bloody, and there was some like stuff in it that was like pretty brutal, if I remember correctly. And so using those two shows, Yellow Jackets and Dexter, I definitely see it going like leaning more Yellow Jackets with some of like its themes and elements, and especially like the bloody elements. But I'm sure like I'd say Yellow Jackets and even beyond, with just like how I just felt like I remember the movie being probably having like grotesque elements to it. But once again, maybe that's just my perspective because I haven't seen it in so long. But obviously, I just thought that was such an interesting thing that I just wanted to kind of make a video about. You know, I mean, maybe in the end, it's kind of like, oh, this was all kind of for naught, like, you know. But like I said, I haven't read up on the show too much, and I'm just basing this on what we saw from the teaser trailer and what I remembered from it. Obviously, I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like, do you have any experience with this? Like, did you ever see the original movie adaptation? Have you ever read the original book? Did you watch the I want to say it was 2010 U.S. remake, Let Me In? What's your experience at all? Are you excited for this remake? Are you reboot? You know, in the form of a TV show? Are you not excited? Are you more curious, waiting to see what's similar, what's different, like what they, you know? So I'm curious. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.